CEO challenged a black single dad in front of her team. Fix the elevator, I'll kiss you right now. The 27th floor of the Meridian Tower buzzed with the kind of energy that only came with serious money walking through the doors. Victoria Price adjusted her navy blazer and checked her watch. 2:47 p.m. The Japanese investors would be here any minute, and this tour needed to be flawless. Remember, she said, her voice cutting through the chatter of her management team. Nakamura Industries doesn't just invest in companies. They invest in leaders. Show them we're worth their confidence. Her heels clicked against the polished marble as she moved through the lobby, each step deliberate and commanding. At 34, Victoria had built Price Dynamics from a struggling tech startup into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and she wore that success like armor. Her employees respected her, feared her a little, and whispered about her legendary perfectionism when they thought she couldn't hear. The glass doors slid open, and a group of impeccably dressed men in dark suits entered. Mr. Hiroshi Nakamura, distinguished with silver-streaked hair, led the delegation with the quiet confidence of someone who moved billions with a signature. Mr. Nakamura. Victoria extended her hand with a practiced smile. Welcome to Price Dynamics. I hope you're ready to see what the future of sustainable technology looks like. As they moved through the building, Victoria's presentation was seamless. She highlighted their latest innovations, their market projections, their commitment to environmental responsibility. The investors nodded approvingly, taking notes, asking pointed questions that she answered with the precision of someone who lived and breathed her business. Now, Victoria said as they approached the elevator bank, I'd like to show you our crown jewel, the research and development floor. This is where we're developing the breakthrough that will revolutionize renewable energy storage. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the group filed in. Victoria pressed the button for the 32nd floor, feeling the familiar surge of pride as they began to ascend. This was her domain, her empire, and today would secure the funding that would take Price Dynamics to the next level. But at the 15th floor, everything stopped. The elevator lurched to a halt with a grinding sound that made everyone's stomach drop. The lights flickered once, twice, then settled into an ominous hum. Victoria felt her carefully constructed presentation crumbling in real time. What the? She caught herself, maintaining her professional composure even as panic clawed at her chest. This is highly unusual. Our maintenance team keeps these elevators in perfect condition. Mr. Nakamura exchanged glances with his colleagues. One of them whispered something in Japanese that Victoria was fairly certain wasn't complimentary. I'll call maintenance immediately, said James Crawford, her VP of Operations, fumbling for his phone. No signal, he announced, holding up his device. The elevator felt smaller by the second. Victoria could practically feel the investors' confidence evaporating with each passing moment. This was supposed to be the presentation that changed everything, and instead they were trapped like sardines in a metal box. That's when she noticed Marcus Johnson. He stood quietly in the corner, having joined the group as part of the building's safety protocol. Maintenance staff always accompanied VIP tours in case of technical issues. At 6'2" with broad shoulders and calloused hands, Marcus looked like someone who could actually fix things instead of just talking about them. His dark skin glistened slightly with perspiration, but his expression remained calm, almost thoughtful. Victoria had seen him around the building for months. He was always polite, always professional, with a quiet dignity that stood out among the maintenance crew. She'd heard through the grapevine that he was a single father, something about raising his daughter alone after his wife died. But right now, she didn't care about his personal life. She cared about salvaging this disaster. An idea formed in her mind. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Marcus, she said, her voice cutting through the nervous murmur of the group. Everyone turned to look at him. You know these elevators better than anyone. Can you get us moving? Marcus met her eyes, his gaze steady and unreadable. I can take a look, Miss Price. But I'd need to access the control panel. Then do it, she said, then paused. The investors were watching this exchange with obvious skepticism. A CEO depending on a maintenance worker to save her presentation? This could either be a miracle or the final nail in her coffin. But Victoria Price hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by playing it safe. Actually, she said, a reckless smile spreading across her face, let's make this interesting. Marcus, you've got. She checked her watch. 15 minutes to get us moving. Fix it right now, and maybe I'll even kiss you in front of everyone if you succeed. The elevator fell dead silent. James Crawford's jaw dropped. The investors looked between Victoria and Marcus like they were watching a tennis match. Someone in the back actually chuckled. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks, realizing she just said something completely inappropriate and potentially career-ending. But there was no taking it back now. She'd thrown down the gauntlet in front of some of the most important people in her professional life. Marcus, however, didn't look shocked or embarrassed. Instead, something sparked in his dark eyes, amusement maybe, or respect for someone willing to put everything on the line. 15 minutes? He said, rolling up his sleeves with deliberate slowness. Miss Price, I'll have us moving in 10. The confidence in his voice sent a ripple through the group. This wasn't the response of someone intimidated by the pressure. This was someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. I'll hold you to that, Victoria replied, matching his tone. And I keep my promises. Marcus moved to the control panel with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. As he began examining the wiring, Victoria found herself studying his profile, the concentration in his expression, the sure movement of his hands, the quiet competence that filled the space around him. For the first time since the elevator had stopped, Victoria felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this disaster could become something else entirely. Maybe Marcus Johnson was exactly the kind of surprise that would impress investors who thought they'd seen everything. As he worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she just started something she couldn't control, and for once in her carefully managed life, that possibility excited rather than terrified her. The clock was ticking, and everyone was watching. Marcus Johnson had been working with his hands since he was 8 years old, when his grandfather first showed him how to fix a broken radio. Listen with your fingers, boy, the old man had said. Machines talk to those who know how to hear them. Right now, the elevator was practically shouting. As the group watched in tense silence, Marcus removed the control panel's cover with practiced efficiency. The familiar maze of wires and circuits greeted him, but something felt wrong immediately. He'd maintained these elevators for 3 years, knew every cable, every connection, every quirk of the aging system. What exactly are you looking for? Asked one of the Japanese investors, his English crisp despite his accent. The problem, Marcus replied simply, running his fingers along the main power relay. These old Otis systems, they're like vintage cars. Reliable, but they have their moods. Victoria found herself leaning closer, watching the sure movement of his hands. There was something almost hypnotic about his focus, the way he seemed to communicate with the machinery through touch alone. My daughter always asks me how I know what's broken. Marcus murmured, more to himself than the group. I tell her it's like listening to someone who can't speak. You've got to pay attention to what they're trying to say. The mention of his daughter softened something in Victoria's chest, though she couldn't say why. Marcus traced the main power line toward the brake system, and that's when he saw it. His fingers stopped moving. Every instinct honed from years of teaching 7-year-old Lily about mechanical systems suddenly screamed danger. The wire hadn't worn through, it had been cut. Not cleanly, but with deliberate irregularity designed to look like natural degradation. But the pattern was all wrong. When wires wore naturally, the breaks happened at stress points, where the metal flexed most. This cut was in the middle of a stable section, and the frayed edges showed the telltale marks of wire strippers, not gradual wear. Someone had sabotaged this elevator. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as the implications hit him. This wasn't a random act of vandalism. Someone had specifically targeted this elevator, knowing it would be used for the investor tour. Someone with access to the building, knowledge of the tour schedule, and a reason to want Victoria Price to fail spectacularly in front of her biggest potential investors. Everything all right? Victoria's voice cut through his racing thoughts. Marcus looked up to find her studying his face with sharp eyes. For a moment, he considered telling her everything. But something held him back, a survival instinct developed through years of being one of the few black faces in corporate spaces, where being the bearer of bad news could quickly turn you into the scapegoat. Who had access? Who knew about the tour? And more importantly, who would benefit from watching Victoria's presentation go up in flames? Just tracing the fault, he said carefully, his voice steady despite his churning thoughts. Found the problem. He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a wire stripper and electrical tape. If he could jury-rig a bypass around the sabotaged section, he could get them moving without anyone knowing what had really happened. At least not until he figured out who was behind this and why. How long have you been doing this kind of work? Mr. Nakamura asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. 15 years. Marcus replied, carefully splicing new wire around the damaged section. Started in the army, fixing communications equipment in places where failure wasn't an option. And you learned all this in the military? Some of it. Marcus tested the connection, satisfied with the secure join. But mostly I learned from my grandfather. He used to say that every machine has a heartbeat. You just have to know how to find it. As he worked, Marcus found himself thinking about Lily's latest project, a broken music box she'd found at a garage sale. She'd been so determined to fix it herself, following his step-by-step guidance as he taught her about gears and springs and the patience required to understand how things worked. The music box has feelings, Daddy, she'd said, her small fingers carefully adjusting a bent spring. It wants to dance again. That memory steadied him now. Whatever conspiracy was playing out in the corporate towers above his pay grade, his job was simple: fix what was broken and keep people safe. Marcus reconnected the main power relay, then moved to the brake release system. The elevator responded immediately, a gentle hum indicating the motors were ready to engage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, standing up and brushing dust from his uniform. We're ready to move. He pressed the up button, and the elevator smoothly began its ascent to the 32nd floor. The reaction was immediate. The investors broke into appreciative murmurs, and James Crawford actually started clapping. But it was Victoria's expression that caught Marcus off guard, surprise mixed with something that looked almost like admiration. 8 minutes and 37 seconds. She announced, checking her watch with a smile that transformed her entire face. I'm impressed, Marcus. Genuinely impressed. Mr. Nakamura stepped forward, extending his hand. That was remarkable. In Japan, we have great respect for craftsmen who can solve problems under pressure. Just doing my job, sir, Marcus replied, accepting the handshake. But inside, he felt a surge of pride he hadn't experienced in years. When was the last time anyone in this building had seen him as anything more than invisible? As the elevator continued its smooth ascent, Victoria moved closer to him. I meant what I said about keeping promises, she said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. Marcus met her eyes, seeing something there he hadn't expected, not just gratitude, but recognition. For the first time, someone in the executive suite was really seeing him. I'll hold you to that, Miss Price, he replied. But even as the moment sparked between them, Marcus couldn't shake the weight of what he'd discovered. Someone in this building wanted Victoria to fail, badly enough to risk the safety of everyone in that elevator. The question was, who? And what would they do when they realized their plan had been thwarted by the one person nobody ever bothered to notice? The investor tour concluded 2 hours later with handshakes, business cards, and promises to be in touch soon. Corporate speak that Victoria knew could mean anything from a signed contract to polite rejection. But the elevator incident had somehow transformed from disaster into demonstration, with Mr. Nakamura specifically praising the company's resourceful problem-solving culture. As the executive team dispersed and the investors were escorted to their waiting cars, Victoria found herself lingering in the lobby, watching Marcus pack his tools with the same methodical care he'd shown during the repair. Marcus, she called out, walking toward him. Could I speak with you for a moment? He looked up, and she noticed the way his shoulders tensed slightly, the reflexive wariness of someone accustomed to being called aside for reprimands rather than praise. Of course, Miss Price. Privately, she added, gesturing toward a quiet seating area near the building's massive windows. They settled into leather chairs that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, though Victoria didn't seem to notice the irony. For a moment she struggled with how to begin. Thanking employees was usually James Crawford's job, handled through formal memos and annual reviews. "What you did up there," she finally said, "that was remarkable. Not just the technical skill, but the composure. The confidence. You probably saved this deal." Marcus nodded politely, but she could see something guarded in his expression. "Just glad I could help." It was more than help. It was. She paused, searching for the right word. Heroic, actually. "And I wanted to thank you personally, not through HR or some corporate memo." Before Marcus could respond, a small voice piped up from behind them. "Daddy?" They turned to see a 7-year-old girl with pigtails and a backpack covered in colorful patches racing across the lobby. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted, his guarded expression melting into pure warmth as he opened his arms. "Hey, Lilybug. How was school? Mrs. Patterson let me feed the classroom hamster, and Tommy Chin shared his cookies with me, and we learned about electricity in science class." She hugged him tightly, then noticed Victoria watching them with obvious curiosity. "Who's that?" Lily asked with the blunt directness only children possessed. "This is Miss Price," Marcus said carefully. "She's the CEO of the company where Daddy works." Lily's eyes widened. "CEO? That means you're like the boss of everything?" Victoria found herself smiling despite her usual discomfort around children. "Something like that." "Wow." Lily stepped closer, completely unintimidated by Victoria's corporate armor. "Do you like being the boss? Does everyone do what you tell them to?" "Lily," Marcus warned gently, but Victoria held up a hand. "It's okay." She knelt down to Lily's eye level, something she'd never done with any child before. "Being the boss means you have to make hard decisions and take care of a lot of people. It's not always easy. Like when Daddy has to fix the broken things in our apartment?" Lily asked. "He always knows how to make stuff work again." "Exactly like that," Victoria said, surprised by how naturally the conversation flowed. "Your daddy fixed something very important today." Lily beamed with pride. "He's really good at fixing things. He taught me how to fix my music box, and Mrs. Henderson's radio, and even the squeaky wheel on my bike." "You fixed all those things yourself?" "Well, Daddy helped," Lily admitted with 7-year-old honesty. "But he says I have good hands for fixing stuff. Just like him and Grandpa Joe." Victoria glanced at Marcus, who was watching the interaction with a mixture of pride and protective alertness. She realized this was probably the longest conversation his daughter had ever had with anyone from his workplace. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Victoria asked. Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe an inventor. Or an engineer. Daddy says girls can build anything boys can build, maybe even better." "Your daddy's absolutely right," Victoria said, and meant it. "I studied engineering before I became a CEO." "Really?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Did you build robots?" "Not robots, but I designed computer systems that help buildings use less electricity. Kind of like teaching buildings how to be smarter about energy." "That's so cool. Could you teach me sometime?" The question caught Victoria off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked her to teach them anything outside a boardroom? When had anyone looked at her with such uncomplicated admiration? "Maybe someday," she said softly. Marcus checked his watch, a practical Timex that had seen better years. "Come on, Lilybug. Miss Price is busy, and we should get home for dinner." "Can Miss Price come to dinner?" Lily asked with the fearless social navigation of childhood. "We're having spaghetti. Daddy makes really good spaghetti." Marcus looked mortified. "Lily, Miss Price has important things to do." "Actually," Victoria surprised herself by saying, "That sounds wonderful. But maybe another time? I have some work to finish up." Lily nodded sagely, as if she understood the weight of important adult responsibilities. Okay. But you should definitely come sometime. Daddy's spaghetti is better than the cafeteria at school. As Marcus gathered his tools in Lily's backpack, Victoria watched them prepare to leave. There was something achingly beautiful about the way they moved around each other, a father and daughter who had learned to be a complete family despite whatever tragedy had taken the mother from the picture. Marcus, she said as they headed toward the exit. Take tomorrow afternoon off. Paid. You've earned it. He paused, turning back with that same guarded expression. That's not necessary, Miss Price. Yes, it is, she said firmly. And bring Lily by some time. I'd like to show her the engineering labs. As they disappeared through the glass doors, Victoria stood alone in the lobby, feeling strangely empty. For the first time in years, her pristine executive life felt hollow compared to the warmth she'd just witnessed. But Marcus walked away with his jaw tight, Lily chattering happily at his side, his mind still turning over the sabotaged wire and the implications it carried. Someone powerful had wanted today to be a disaster. Someone who knew Victoria's schedule, who had access to the building, who stood to benefit from her failure. And now that someone would know their plan had been thwarted by a maintenance worker nobody usually bothered to notice. That thought made Marcus hold Lily's hand a little tighter as they stepped into the evening air. Edward Steele stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 35th floor, watching the stream of black town cars pull away from the Meridian Tower's circular drive. From this height, the investors looked like ants disappearing into the urban landscape, carrying with them Victoria Price's hopes for the future. At 62, Edward had the kind of distinguished silver hair and expensive suit that commanded boardrooms across the country. As chairman of the board of directors, he'd been instrumental in Price Dynamics' early growth, back when Victoria was still a hungry young entrepreneur with more ambition than sense. But that hungry young woman had grown into something he hadn't anticipated, a CEO who no longer needed his guidance, his connections, or his approval. His phone buzzed with a text from his contact inside the investor group. Meeting went better than expected. Elevator incident actually impressed Nakamura. They're moving forward with due diligence. Edward's jaw tightened as he read the message twice, then deleted it. The elevator wasn't supposed to get fixed. The whole point had been to showcase Victoria's inability to handle crisis, to plant seeds of doubt about her leadership in the minds of Japan's most conservative investors. Instead, some nobody maintenance worker had turned disaster into triumph. Edward had watched the entire scene unfold from the security monitors and building management. The way Victoria had boldly challenged the maintenance man, the calm confidence with which he'd worked, the obvious respect he'd earned from the investors, it had all gone spectacularly wrong. But what troubled Edward most was how quickly the elevator had been repaired. He'd paid good money to have those wires cut in a way that would take hours to diagnose, let alone fix. Either Marcus Johnson was incredibly lucky, or he was far more skilled than his job title suggested. Or worse, he'd recognized the sabotage for what it was. A knock on his office door interrupted his brooding. "Come in." His assistant, Patricia, entered with her usual efficient smile. "Mr. Steele? I have the building maintenance records you requested." Edward accepted the file folder, flipping it open to reveal Marcus Johnson's employment history. Army veteran, honorable discharge, solid references, clean background check. Widower, single father, no red flags anywhere in his record. But the military experience caught Edward's attention. Communications equipment repair. Someone with that background would absolutely recognize sabotage when he saw it. "Patricia," Edward said carefully, "I need you to pull the security footage from Elevator Bank C, between 2:30 and 4 p.m. today. Have it sent to my personal email." "Of course, sir. Anything specific you're looking for?" "Just want to review how our maintenance team handled the situation. For future reference." After Patricia left, Edward opened his laptop and began reviewing Marcus Johnson's file more carefully. The man lived in a modest apartment in Riverside, drove a 10-year-old Honda, had a daughter in elementary school. His financial record showed someone living paycheck to paycheck, barely covering rent and childcare costs. That kind of desperation could be useful. 2 hours later, Edward made his way down to the maintenance level in the building's basement. The corridors here smelled of industrial cleaner and machine oil, a stark contrast to the marble and mahogany of the executive floors. He'd rarely ventured into this part of the building, preferring to manage through intermediaries and reports. He found Marcus Johnson in the equipment room, updating maintenance logs on an old computer terminal. The man looked up as Edward entered, and something flickered across his face: surprise, wariness, perhaps recognition of danger. "Mr. Johnson," Edward said with the kind of smile he used in hostile board meetings. "I don't think we've been formally introduced." "Edward Steele, chairman of the board." Marcus stood slowly, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "Mr. Steele, what can I do for you? I wanted to personally thank you for your quick thinking today. The way you handled that elevator situation, impressive work." "Just doing my job, sir." Edward studied the younger man's face, looking for tells, signs of knowledge or suspicion. Marcus's expression remained politely neutral, but there was something in his eyes, an intelligence that Edward suspected most people overlooked. 8 minutes, Edward continued, circling closer. "That's remarkably fast for what should have been a complex diagnosis. Most technicians would have needed an hour just to identify the problem." "Sometimes you get lucky," Marcus replied evenly. "Luck," Edward repeated. "Yes, I suppose that's one explanation." They stood in silence for a moment, the air thick with unspoken tension. Edward could hear the building's mechanical systems humming around them: air handlers, water pumps, electrical systems that Marcus probably knew better than anyone else in the company. "You know," Edward said finally, "in my experience, when something seems too convenient, too perfectly timed, it usually means someone knows more than they're letting on." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I'm not sure I follow, Mr. Steele. The thing about building maintenance," Edward continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, "is that it puts a man in a unique position. Access to every floor, every system, every conversation that people think is private. A smart man in that position might see things, hear things, learn things that others assume he's too insignificant to notice. I focus on my work and my daughter," Marcus said quietly. "Everything else is above my pay grade." "Exactly." Edward smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's exactly the kind of wisdom I like to hear. A man who understands his place, who knows that some things are better left unexplored." Edward pulled a business card from his jacket and placed it on the workbench between them. "That's my personal number, Marcus. If you ever need anything at all, for you or your daughter, don't hesitate to call." The mention of Lily made Marcus's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, but Edward caught it. "That's very generous, Mr. Steele, but we're doing fine." "Of course you are. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Medical bills, school expenses, car repairs. A single father's salary can only stretch so far." Edward headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Marcus? Sometimes the best way to help the people we care about is to stay out of things we don't fully understand. Politics, corporate dynamics, complex situations where good intentions can have unintended consequences." With that, he disappeared into the corridor, leaving Marcus alone with the business card and the unmistakable scent of threat hanging in the recycled air. Marcus stared at the card for a long moment before crumpling it and tossing it into the trash. But Edward's words echoed in his mind: unintended consequences. The man knew. Somehow, Edward Steele knew that Marcus had discovered the sabotage. And now Marcus had to decide what to do with that knowledge. Marcus Johnson sat at his kitchen table at 11:47 p.m., surrounded by bills that seemed to multiply like weeds. The laptop Lily had been using for homework cast a pale glow across overdue notices from the electric company, the pediatrician's office, and the auto repair shop where his Honda was currently held hostage for $800 worth of transmission work. He rubbed his temples, trying to massage away the tension that had been building since his encounter with Edward Steele 6 hours earlier. The crumpled business card sat in his trash can, but the man's words echoed louder than the sirens wailing somewhere in the distance outside his apartment window. Sometimes the best way to help the people we care about is to stay out of things we don't fully understand. The threat had been wrapped in silk, but it was still a threat. Marcus picked up the pediatrician's bill, $3.40 for Lily's last checkup and vaccinations. His insurance had covered most of it, but the remainder sat there like an accusation. He'd been putting off scheduling her next appointment, hoping to catch up on his other debts first. From down the hall came the soft sound of Lily talking in her sleep, probably dreaming about the music box she'd finally gotten working or the hamster she'd fed at school. At 7 years old, she still believed the world was fundamentally safe, that her daddy could fix anything that broke. Marcus had been working overtime for 3 months straight, picking up weekend shifts and emergency calls, but it never seemed to be enough. The cost of living kept climbing while his salary remained frustratingly static. He'd applied for supervisory positions at other companies, but without a college degree, most doors remained closed to him. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check your email." E.S. Marcus frowned, opening his laptop and navigating to his personal Gmail account. There, waiting in his inbox, was a message with no subject line from a corporate address he didn't recognize. "Mr. Johnson, I've been thinking about our conversation this afternoon. As I mentioned, I have great respect for skilled craftsmen who understand the value of discretion. After reviewing your work history and current situation, I believe we may have an opportunity for mutual benefit. I'm prepared to offer you a consulting fee of $50,000 for your expertise regarding building systems and maintenance protocols. This would be a private arrangement, requiring minimal time commitment from you. The only requirement would be your commitment to confidentiality regarding certain operational matters. I realize this may seem sudden, but I believe in recognizing talent when I see it. Your daughter deserves every opportunity, and I'd hate to see financial constraints limit her potential. The offer stands for 48 hours. I trust you'll consider what's best for your family. E. Steele, Chairman, Board of Directors, Price Dynamics." Marcus stared at the screen, his heart pounding. $50,000. That would wipe out every debt, pay for Lily's medical expenses for the next 2 years, maybe even let him start a college fund for her. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut about what he'd found in that elevator. He closed the laptop and walked to Lily's bedroom, pushing open the door just enough to check on her. She slept peacefully, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings she'd made at school. On her nightstand sat the music box they'd repaired together, a delicate ballerina frozen mid-spin in the moonlight streaming through her window. Your daughter deserves every opportunity. The words hit harder than any direct threat could have. Because they were true. Lily was brilliant, curious, full of potential that Marcus sometimes worried he couldn't properly nurture on a maintenance worker's salary. She deserved piano lessons, summer camps, college without crushing debt. She deserved the kind of opportunities that $50,000 could buy. But she also deserved a father she could be proud of. Marcus returned to the kitchen and reopened the email, reading it again. The language was carefully crafted, never explicitly mentioning the sabotage, never directly acknowledging any wrongdoing. Just a vague, consulting fee for his discretion regarding operational matters. If he accepted, he'd be complicit in whatever Edward Steele was planning. The elevator incident might have been just the beginning. How many more accidents would there be? How many people could get hurt while Marcus stayed silent for money? But what if he refused? Edward's message about unintended consequences replayed in his mind. The man had access to Marcus's employment records, his address, probably his daughter's school information. A single phone call could end his career, make him unemployable in the industry. And without his job, how would he take care of Lily? His phone rang, startling him out of his dark thoughts. The caller ID showed his sister Denise's number. "Marcus? I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. How did the big investor thing go today?" Denise was the only family he had left since their parents died, a nurse who worked double shifts to support her own 2 kids. She'd been his lifeline after Sarah's death, helping with childcare and emotional support when he'd barely been able to function. It went complicated, he said, not sure how to explain any of it. Complicated how? You sound stressed. Marcus found himself telling her about the elevator repair, Victoria's challenge, the investor's praise. But he left out Edward Steele, the sabotage, the email sitting open on his laptop screen. That's incredible, Marcus! Maybe this is your break. Maybe that CEO will finally see what you're capable of. Maybe, he said quietly. You don't sound happy about it. What's wrong? Marcus stared at the overdue bills scattered across his table. Denise, if someone offered you money, a lot of money, to look the other way on something you knew was wrong, what would you do? The line went quiet for a moment. Is someone asking you to do that? Hypothetically. Hypothetically, I'd remember what Daddy always told us about integrity. That it's not something you can buy back once you've sold it. Their father had been a postal worker, honest to a fault, who lost a promotion once for refusing to falsify delivery records. The family had struggled financially that year, but Marcus remembered the quiet pride in his father's voice when he'd explained why he couldn't compromise his principles. But what if it wasn't just about you? Marcus pressed. What if other people, people you love, would benefit from that money? Oh, Marcus. Denise's voice softened with understanding. This isn't hypothetical, is it? Someone's trying to buy your silence about something. Marcus didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Whatever it is, Denise said gently, remember that Lily's watching you. Kids learn more from what we do than what we say. If you take dirty money now, what lesson does that teach her about right and wrong? After hanging up, Marcus sat in the quiet kitchen, torn between love for his daughter and the values he wanted to instill in her. $50,000. Lily's future. His silence. The decision felt impossible. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of autumn sunshine that made even Marcus's modest apartment feel hopeful. He barely slept, Edward Steele's email burning in his mind like a brand, but the sound of Lily humming in the kitchen pulled him from his dark thoughts. He found her at the counter, standing on her step-stool and carefully measuring cereal into 2 bowls with the precision of a young scientist. Her hair stuck up in several directions, and she wore her favorite pajamas, the ones with tiny wrenches and screwdrivers printed all over them. Morning, Daddy, she said without looking up from her careful pouring. I made breakfast. I can see that. Very professional work, Chef. Lily beamed at the praise, then climbed down to put the milk away. As she did, Marcus noticed her music box sitting open on the counter, the tiny ballerina turning slowly to the delicate melody. It still works perfectly, Lily announced, following his gaze. Mrs. Chin next door heard it yesterday and asked if you could look at her clock radio. I told her you're the best fixer in the whole world. Something tight loosened in Marcus's chest. Did you now? Yep. Lily settled into her chair, swinging her legs. You know why you're so good at fixing things, Daddy? Why's that? Because you don't give up when something's broken. Remember when Tommy's dad said my bike couldn't be fixed because the wheel was too bent? But you spent the whole weekend making it work again. Marcus remembered. He'd watched YouTube videos, borrowed tools he didn't own, and spent hours in their building's basement adjusting spokes and truing the wheel. Not because he couldn't afford a new bike, though he couldn't, but because Lily had loved that particular bike, with its purple paint and the basket she decorated with stickers. That's what heroes do, Lily continued, stirring her cereal thoughtfully. They fix what's broken, even when it's really hard. The word hero hit Marcus like a physical blow. I'm not a hero, Lilybug. I'm just your dad. Same thing, she said with 7-year-old logic. You're my hero because you always make the broken things work again. And you never lie to me, even when the truth is scary. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. You never lie to me. How could he look at this perfect, trusting child and take money to stay silent about something that could hurt people? How could he teach her about integrity while compromising his own? Lily, he said carefully, what if someone offered you money to keep a secret about something bad? She considered this with the seriousness she brought to all moral questions. What kind of bad? The kind that could hurt people. Then you have to tell, she said immediately. Even if they give you $1 million. Because hurting people is wrong. But what if telling the secret meant we might have problems? Like, what if I lost my job? Lily's face scrunched with worry. Would we be okay? Marcus reached across to squeeze her small hand. We'd figure it out. We always do. Then you should tell, she said with absolute certainty. Because you taught me that doing the right thing is more important than being comfortable. After breakfast, while Lily worked on a school project at the kitchen table, Marcus sat on their small balcony and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his photos until he found what he was looking for, pictures he'd taken in the elevator shaft 3 days ago during routine maintenance. He'd been documenting worn cables for his monthly report when he noticed something odd about the wiring near the brake system. At the time, he'd assumed it was unusual wear patterns and had photographed it for the maintenance log. But looking at the images now, with the knowledge of what he'd found during the repair, the sabotage was obvious. The cuts were deliberate, designed to look like natural degradation but clearly made with tools. Someone had spent time planning this, knowing exactly which wires to damage to create maximum embarrassment with minimum danger. Marcus looked back through the window at Lily, bent over her homework with the same concentration he'd seen her use to fix her music box. She'd been right, heroes fixed what was broken, even when it was hard. He opened his contacts and scrolled to Victoria Price's number, which he'd added after she'd given it to him for emergency maintenance calls. Ms. Price, this is Marcus Johnson. I need to speak with you privately about the elevator incident. It's important. Could we meet somewhere confidential? The response came faster than he'd expected. My office. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Before anyone else arrives. That evening, Marcus tucked Lily into bed with extra care, reading her favorite story twice and staying until she fell asleep. As he watched her peaceful face in the moonlight, he thought about the kind of man he wanted her to remember when she was grown. Not the man who took $50,000 to stay quiet about sabotage. Not the man who chose safety over integrity. But the man who taught her that broken things could be fixed, that truth was more valuable than money, and that heroes weren't people who never felt afraid. They were people who did the right thing despite their fear. His phone buzzed with another message from Edward Steele's number. 24 hours remaining. I hope you'll make the wise choice for your family's sake. Marcus deleted the message without responding, then walked to his laptop and began typing his own email. Mr. Steele? Thank you for your offer, but I must decline. My services are not for sale, and my silence is not negotiable. Marcus Johnson. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then immediately called his sister. Denise? It's Marcus. I'm going to do something tomorrow that might cost me my job. If anything happens to me, I need you to know that Lily's college fund is in the savings account at First National. The account number is... Marcus, what's going on? I'm doing what Dad would have done, he said simply. I'm fixing something that's broken. As he hung up and prepared for what might be his last night as a Price Dynamics employee, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, he'd be able to look Lily in the eye and know he'd chosen to be the hero she already believed him to be. The broken thing he was fixing wasn't just an elevator, it was his own integrity. Victoria Price arrived at her office at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than planned. She'd barely slept, Marcus's cryptic message replaying in her mind. It's important. Something in those 2 words had carried weight that made her stomach clench with anticipation. The executive floor felt different in the pre-dawn quiet, less like a fortress of corporate power and more like an empty stage waiting for the day's drama to unfold. She made coffee with shaking hands, unsure why she felt so nervous about a conversation with a maintenance worker. At exactly 7 a.m., Marcus knocked on her door. Come in, she called, and was surprised by how relieved she felt to see him. Marcus entered carrying a manila folder, and wearing the same careful expression she'd seen when Edward Steele had approached him after the elevator incident. The memory of that interaction, which she'd witnessed from across the lobby, suddenly felt significant in a way she hadn't recognized before. "Thank you for meeting me, Ms. Price. What I have to show you could be problematic." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Marcus, whatever it is, just tell me." He sat down and opened the folder, revealing several printed photographs. "These were taken during routine maintenance 3 days ago. I didn't think much of them at the time, but after what I found during the repair." Victoria leaned forward as he spread the photos across her desk. Even to her untrained eye, the damaged wires looked wrong, too clean, too deliberate. "The elevator wasn't malfunctioning," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was revealing. "Someone sabotaged it. The cuts were designed to look like natural wear, but the pattern is all wrong. This was intentional." Victoria stared at the evidence, her mind racing through the implications. "You're telling me someone wanted that elevator to fail during the investor meeting?" "Yes, ma'am. And they had to have building access, knowledge of your schedule, and understanding of the elevator systems. That's..." Victoria felt the room spin slightly. "That's a very short list of people." Marcus nodded grimly. "I photographed the actual damage during the repair as well. The person who did this knew exactly which wires to cut to cause maximum embarrassment with minimal safety risk. This wasn't vandalism, it was corporate sabotage." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it automatically, then froze. "Good morning, Victoria. I hope you're having a productive start to your day. Perhaps we should discuss your choice of confidants?" "Yes." Ice water flooded her veins. Edward knew. Somehow, he knew about this meeting. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need you to leave. Right now. Take the photos with you and don't speak to anyone about this until I figure out what's going on. Ms. Price. Please." Her voice cracked slightly. "Just trust me. I'll be in touch." After Marcus left, Victoria sat in her office, staring at Edward Steele's message. The timing wasn't coincidental. Edward had eyes and ears throughout the building, and somehow he'd learned about her 7 a.m. meeting with Marcus. She deleted the text and immediately began making calls. By lunchtime, Marcus had received 3 messages from unknown numbers, each more unsettling than the last. "Nice daughter you have. 2nd grade at Riverside Elementary, right? Shame if something happened to disrupt her education. Children are so vulnerable these days. So many dangers in the world." Marcus's hands shook as he deleted each message, his protective instincts screaming danger. He immediately called Lily's school, explaining that he needed to pick her up early for a family emergency. "Daddy?" Lily asked as they walked quickly to his car. "Why do you look scared?" Marcus forced his voice to remain calm. "Just some work stuff, Lilybug. How about we go to Aunt Denise's house for dinner tonight? Can we stop for ice cream on the way?" "Absolutely." As they drove through the city, Marcus constantly checked his rearview mirror, looking for cars that might be following them. Every dark sedan made his pulse spike. Every stranger on the sidewalk became a potential threat. At Denise's house, he pulled his sister aside while Lily played with her cousins. "I need you to keep Lily tonight. Maybe tomorrow too." "Marcus, what's happening? You look like you've seen a ghost." He showed her the messages, watching her face pale as she read them. "Oh my God! We need to call the police." "And tell them what? That someone sent vague text messages? There's no direct threat, nothing they can act on. But someone's making it clear they know where Lily goes to school, where she'll be vulnerable." Denise gripped his arm. "What did you do?" "I tried to do the right thing," Marcus said bitterly. "I tried to expose corporate sabotage, and now my daughter is paying the price." Meanwhile, Victoria had spent the morning quietly mobilizing resources Edward didn't know she possessed. Her college roommate now worked in corporate security. Her former MIT professor consulted for the FBI. The venture capital firm that had given her seed funding had connections throughout the investigation industry. By 2 p.m., she had a team of discreet investigators examining Edward's financial records, phone logs, and email patterns. By 4 p.m., they'd found irregularities in several company accounts that Edward oversaw as board chairman. Victoria's secure phone rang with an update from her lead investigator, a former federal prosecutor named Sarah Chin. "Victoria, we've found some interesting connections. Edward Steele has been in communication with Yamamoto Industries, Nakamura's primary competitor in the renewable energy sector. There are payments flowing through shell companies that suggest he's been feeding them intelligence about your operations. He's selling company secrets. More than that. Based on the timing of these payments and the communications we've intercepted, it looks like he's been actively sabotaging deals to depress your company's value. The elevator incident fits the pattern perfectly." Victoria felt rage building in her chest. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months. Maybe longer. "Victoria, there's something else. We've tracked down the source of some threatening messages sent to Marcus Johnson today. They trace back to phones registered under shell companies connected to Edward's network." "He's threatening Marcus?" "More specifically, he's threatening the man's 7-year-old daughter." Victoria's vision went red. She'd built her reputation on being ruthless in business, but threatening a child crossed every line she'd ever drawn. "Sarah, I want everything you've found documented and prepared for law enforcement. And I want to know Edward's exact location right now. Victoria, be careful. Men like Edward don't go down quietly." As evening fell over the city, Victoria sat in her office, surrounded by evidence of Edward's betrayal. Marcus was somewhere out there, probably terrified for his daughter's safety because he tried to help her. The game had changed. This wasn't about corporate politics anymore. This was war. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 a.m. sharp on Wednesday, 3 days after Marcus had revealed the sabotage evidence to Victoria. The Meridian Towers executive conference room buzzed with tension as board members, key investors, and senior management filed in around the massive mahogany table. Victoria entered last, her expression carefully neutral despite the storm raging beneath the surface. She'd spent 72 hours building her case, but she knew Edward would be ready with countermoves. Men like him didn't survive decades in corporate warfare by being unprepared. Edward Steele sat at the head of the table in his role as board chairman, projecting the calm confidence of someone who believed he held all the cards. Mr. Nakamura sat to his right, flanked by 2 other representatives from the Japanese investment group, their faces unreadable. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Edward began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "Given the recent irregularities in our operations, I felt it necessary to address some serious concerns about Price Dynamics leadership and safety protocols." Victoria kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "Here it comes. As you know," Edward continued, "we experienced a significant elevator malfunction during our investor tour last week. While the immediate crisis was resolved, a deeper investigation has revealed troubling patterns of negligence in our building maintenance and safety oversight." He gestured to a prepared presentation, clicking to a slide showing maintenance logs. "Our building systems have been experiencing an unusual number of failures over the past 6 months. Elevator malfunctions, HVAC issues, electrical problems. The kind of systematic breakdowns that suggest either incompetent management or willful neglect of employee and visitor safety." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Nakamura leaned forward, his expression growing concerned. "Furthermore," Edward's voice grew more gravely serious, "I've discovered that our CEO has been meeting secretly with maintenance staff, possibly attempting to cover up the extent of these safety violations. Just this morning, I learned of clandestine 7 a.m. meetings in her office, suggesting an attempt to manage information rather than address the underlying problems." Victoria felt the room's energy shift as doubt crept into the faces around the table. Edward was masterful at this, mixing truth with manipulation, using her legitimate meeting with Marcus as evidence of conspiracy rather than responsibility. "The question we must ask ourselves," Edward concluded, "is whether we can trust leadership that puts public relations ahead of public safety. What happens when the next elevator doesn't get fixed in time? What happens when our negligence actually kills someone? The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria could see the calculation in the investor's eyes, the way Edward's narrative was reshaping their perception of recent events. Then she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. The conference room doors opened, and Marcus Johnson walked in, carrying a manila folder and wearing his best dress shirt, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences and job interviews. Behind him, to everyone's surprise, walked a woman in a sharp business suit that Victoria recognized as Sarah Chin, the investigator she'd hired. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. "But I have information this board needs to hear." Edward's composure cracked slightly. "This is a closed meeting, Mr. Johnson. You'll need to let him speak," Victoria said firmly. "Mr. Johnson is the maintenance supervisor who repaired the elevator. If we're discussing safety protocols, his expertise is relevant." Mr. Nakamura nodded. "Yes, please. We would like to hear from the man who solved the problem." Marcus moved to the front of the room, and Victoria could see the slight tremor in his hands as he opened his folder. She knew what this moment was costing him, the risk to his job, to his daughter's safety, to everything he'd worked to build. "Mr. Chairman, members of the board," Marcus began. "The elevator didn't malfunction. It was sabotaged." The room erupted in murmurs, but Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "These photographs show the damage I found during the repair." He placed the images on the conference table, spreading them where everyone could see. These wires were cut deliberately, designed to look like natural wear but clearly made with tools. Edward stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You're suggesting some kind of conspiracy." "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus interrupted, meeting Edward's gaze directly. "I'm stating facts. Someone with building access, knowledge of our safety systems, and detailed information about the investor tour schedule orchestrated this sabotage to embarrass Ms. Price in front of your guests." "Preposterous," Edward blustered. "Why would you believe the word of?" "Because I have corroborating evidence." Sarah Chin stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table. "Financial records showing payments from Yamamoto Industries to shell companies controlled by Edward Steele. Communication logs proving he shared confidential company information with our competitors. And phone records connecting him to the anonymous threats made against Mr. Johnson's 7-year-old daughter after he tried to report the sabotage." The color drained from Edward's face. Several board members gasped audibly. Mr. Nakamura studied the photographs with the intensity of someone who'd built an empire on attention to detail. "These cuts, they are too precise for accident, too random for natural wear. This is deliberate damage." "Mr. Johnson," another board member asked, "why didn't you report this immediately?" Marcus glanced at Victoria, then back to the board. "Because I was afraid. I'm a single father with a daughter to protect, and Mr. Steele made it clear that exposing this information could have consequences for my family. But my daughter taught me something important, that heroes fix what's broken, even when it's scary." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Edward Steele, the distinguished board chairman, had not only betrayed the company to competitors but had threatened a child to cover his tracks. "The real safety issue," Marcus continued, "isn't maintenance negligence. It's having someone in leadership who would endanger innocent people, employees, investors, visitors, to serve his own agenda." Victoria stood slowly, feeling the room's energy shifting in her favor. "The question isn't whether I can be trusted with safety," she said, her voice carrying new authority. "The question is whether we can afford to keep someone on this board who would sabotage his own company and threaten children to maintain his power." Mr. Nakamura looked around the table, then directly at Edward. "Mr. Steele, do you have a response to these accusations?" Edward's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. The man who had commanded boardrooms for decades stood exposed, his betrayal laid bare by a maintenance worker he'd never bothered to see as a threat. The tide had turned completely. Edward Steele looked around the conference table like a cornered animal, his silver hair disheveled and his usually immaculate suit wrinkled from what had clearly been a sleepless night. The evidence spread before him was damning, undeniable, and completely comprehensive. "This is," he began, then stopped, seeming to realize that any words he spoke would only deepen his grave. Mr. Nakamura picked up one of the financial documents, studying it with the methodical precision that had made him one of Japan's most successful investors. "These payments from Yamamoto Industries," he said quietly, "they correspond exactly with the dates of our confidential negotiations. You sold our business secrets to our competitors." "Hiroshi," Edward tried, reaching for the familiarity of their 20-year business relationship. "You have to understand the pressure I was under. Victoria's reckless expansion plans were going to destroy everything we'd built." "By sabotaging elevators?" Victoria's voice cut through his excuses like steel. "By threatening a 7-year-old child?" The room fell into shocked silence. Several board members who had been Edward's allies for years now stared at him with disgust and disbelief. Sarah-chan stepped forward, placing additional documents on the table. "The phone records are conclusive. The threats against Marcus Johnson's daughter came from devices registered to your shell companies, Mr. Steele. You used intimidation tactics against a child to maintain your conspiracy." Marcus stood silently near the wall, watching the man who had tried to destroy his family finally face justice. But there was no satisfaction in his expression, only the quiet dignity of someone who had chosen courage over comfort and watched truth prevail. Dr. Patricia Williams, the longest-serving board member, spoke first. "Edward, I've known you for 15 years. I trusted you. We all trusted you." Her voice shook with betrayal. "How could you endanger everyone in this building? How could you threaten a child? The safety protocols were adequate," Edward protested weakly. "The elevator sabotage was designed to cause embarrassment, not injury. Designed by you." Mr. Nakamura's carefully controlled composure finally cracked. "You created a dangerous situation involving dozens of people, including my investment team, to serve your personal vendetta. This is unconscionable." Victoria looked around the table, seeing the faces of people she'd worked with, fought with, and respected for years. Some had been Edward's supporters, others her critics, but now they were united in their revulsion at what had been revealed. "I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in Edward Steele as chairman of the board," she announced formally. "Seconded," came Dr. Williams' voice immediately. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room rose except Edward's. "The motion passes unanimously," Victoria declared. "Edward Steele is removed from the board of directors effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and our legal team will be in contact regarding criminal charges." Edward stood slowly, the weight of his disgrace visible in every movement. As he reached the door, he turned back one last time, his face twisted with bitter defeat. "You think you've won, Victoria? You have no idea what you've unleashed." Running a company requires making hard choices, compromises you're too idealistic to understand. It requires integrity. Marcus spoke for the first time since presenting his evidence, his voice quiet but carrying absolute conviction. "Something you never had." Edward's mouth opened to respond, but no words came. He left in silence, flanked by security guards, his 30-year career ending in shame and criminal investigation. As the door closed behind him, the conference room buzzed with relief and residual shock. Board members clustered in small groups, processing what they'd witnessed, while the Japanese investors spoke quietly among themselves in rapid Japanese. Victoria turned to address the room, but before she could speak, the conference room doors burst open again. "Daddy!" Lily Johnson raced into the room, her school backpack bouncing as she ran straight to Marcus with the fearless determination of a child who had spotted her hero. Behind her, looking harried and apologetic, came Denise. "I'm so sorry," Denise called out. "I brought her here because she was worried about you, and she just—" But Marcus was already kneeling to catch Lily in his arms, lifting her up in a fierce hug that spoke of 3 days of terror and relief. "I heard the mean man was trying to hurt you," Lily whispered against his ear, loud enough for the entire room to hear. But you stopped him, didn't you? Just like you stop all the broken things. We stopped him. Marcus corrected gently, glancing at Victoria. Sometimes it takes a team to fix the really broken things. Mr. Nakamura watched this exchange with obvious emotion, and Victoria realized that the Japanese investors were seeing something they hadn't expected, a company where a maintenance worker was willing to risk everything for integrity, where a CEO would stand by an employee against powerful corruption, where a 7-year-old girl could run into a boardroom and find safety in her father's arms. Victoria stepped forward, her usual corporate composure cracking as she looked at Marcus holding his daughter. "Marcus," she said, her voice unsteady in a way that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "I need to say something." The room quieted, sensing the importance of the moment. 3 days ago, a man I barely knew risked his job, his safety, and his daughter's well-being to protect this company and everyone in it. He did it not because he had to, but because it was right. Victoria's voice grew stronger, more certain. That kind of courage, that kind of integrity, is worth more than all the corporate strategies and business plans in the world. She paused, looking around the room at faces that were seeing her in a new way, not as the ice-cold CEO, but as a woman capable of being moved, of recognizing heroism where others saw only an employee. "Marcus, you didn't just expose corruption. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. You made me remember that business is ultimately about people, protecting them, serving them, being worthy of their trust." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'd forgotten that somewhere along the way. I'd forgotten how to trust people, how to see the good in them instead of just the angles they might be working." Lily had been listening with the intense focus children brought to adult conversations they sensed were important. "Does this mean Daddy's not in trouble anymore?" she asked. Victoria smiled, and for the first time in years, it was completely genuine. "Your daddy is a hero, Lily. And heroes never get in trouble for doing what's right." The applause that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt, led by Mr. Nakamura himself. As the sound filled the room, Victoria felt something shift inside her, walls she'd built to protect herself from disappointment and betrayal beginning to crumble, replaced by something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Hope. 3 weeks after Edward Steele's ignominious departure, price dynamics hummed with a different energy. The paranoia and political maneuvering that had poisoned the corporate culture began to dissipate, replaced by something Victoria hadn't felt in her own company for years: genuine collaboration. The Japanese investment had come through, Mr. Nakamura later confiding that Marcus's courage had impressed him more than any financial projection could have. "A company where maintenance workers risk everything for integrity," he'd said, "is a company worth investing in." Victoria stood in her office on a Friday evening, watching the sun set over the city through her floor-to-ceiling windows. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of damage control, restructuring, and rebuilding trust with clients who'd heard rumors about the internal conspiracy. But for the first time in months, she felt genuinely optimistic about the future. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Marcus entered, looking uncomfortable in the unfamiliar territory of the executive floor during after-hours quiet. He'd been promoted to Director of Building Operations the previous week, a position Victoria had created specifically for him, recognizing that his skills extended far beyond basic maintenance. "You wanted to see me, Ms. Price?" "Victoria," she corrected for the 100th time. "And yes, sit down. Please." Marcus settled into the chair across from her desk, the same one he'd occupied 3 weeks ago when he'd first shown her the sabotage evidence. But the dynamic between them had shifted in ways neither had fully acknowledged yet. "How are you settling into the new role?" Victoria asked. "It's different. Good different. Having a real budget for preventive maintenance, being part of operational planning instead of just reacting to emergencies. It's what I always hoped facilities management could be." Victoria smiled. "You've already identified inefficiencies that are saving us $30,000 a month. I'd say you're adapting well." "Lily's excited about the salary increase," Marcus admitted. "She's already planning how to redecorate her room and asking about piano lessons." The mention of Lily made Victoria's expression soften in a way that still surprised Marcus. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd made excuses to visit the engineering floors where Lily sometimes waited after school, bringing her small engineering puzzles and talking to her about science with genuine enthusiasm. Actually, Victoria said, her professional composure slipping slightly, I wanted to discuss something with you that goes beyond your official position here. Marcus raised an eyebrow, waiting. Victoria stood and moved to the window, then turned back to face him. Marcus, what happened with Edward, what you did, it changed something in me. I'd built walls around myself so high that I'd forgotten what it felt like to trust someone completely, to see real goodness in another person. Victoria, let me finish, she said softly. I've been thinking about this for weeks, trying to understand what I'm feeling. You risked everything to protect people you barely knew. You chose integrity over safety, truth over comfort. And watching you with Lily, seeing how you've raised such an incredible little girl on your own, it made me realize how much I've been missing. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate as he recognized the direction of this conversation. I'm not good at this, Victoria continued, a slight tremor in her voice. I'm not good at being vulnerable or admitting I need someone. But I do need you, Marcus. Not just professionally, personally. I want you in my life, in whatever way you'll have me. The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 weeks of growing connection, shared glances, and the kind of recognition that happens when two people discover they complement each other's broken places. Victoria, Marcus said carefully, you're brilliant, successful, beautiful. You could have anyone. I'm a single father who works with his hands and lives paycheck to paycheck. You're a man who stands up to billionaires to protect children, Victoria interrupted. You're a father who's raised a daughter so full of light and courage that she makes everyone around her want to be better. You're someone who sees broken things and makes them whole again. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I've been broken for a long time, Marcus. I'd forgotten I could be fixed. Before Marcus could respond, the office door burst open with the particular energy that could only be 7-year-old Lily. Daddy! Mrs. Chen said I could come up to get you and, oh! She stopped short, seeing the intensity of the conversation she'd interrupted. Are you two having important grown-up talk? Victoria laughed, the tension breaking like a soap bubble. Actually, Lily, we were just discussing some partnership opportunities. What kind of partnerships? Lily asked with the directness that had become her trademark. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances, and Victoria knelt down to Lily's eye level. The kind where maybe your daddy and I spend more time together. Outside of work. Lily's eyes widened with delight. Like dating? Are you going to date my daddy? Would that be okay with you? Victoria asked seriously, recognizing that Lily's approval was essential to any future they might have. Are you kidding? Lily practically bounced with excitement. Daddy's been happier ever since you started talking to him. And you're really smart, and you're teaching me about engineering, and you have that pretty smile when you forget to be scary. Victoria blinked in surprise. When I forget to be scary? Yeah, like right now, Lily said matter-of-factly. You're not being the boss lady. You're just being Victoria who likes my daddy. Marcus stood, moving closer to Victoria. Out of the mouths of babes, he murmured. So, Lily announced with the authority of someone orchestrating a major life event. I think we should celebrate with ice cream. All 3 of us. Right now. Victoria looked at Marcus, seeing her own hopes reflected in his eyes. I can't remember the last time I had ice cream. Then we definitely need to fix that, Marcus said, extending his hand to her. As Victoria took his hand, feeling the callous strength of his fingers intertwining with hers, Lily cheered with triumph. This is the best day ever! Can we get chocolate chip cookie dough? And can we sit outside even though it's getting cold? And maybe we can look at the stars and you can tell me more about engineering. 20 minutes later, the 3 of them walked out of the Meridian Tower into the crisp evening air. Victoria had changed from her executive heels into sneakers she kept in her office, and for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying a briefcase or checking her phone. Lily skipped between them, holding both their hands, chattering about school and music boxes and the ice cream flavors she wanted to try. Marcus caught Victoria's eye over Lily's head, and they shared a smile that spoke of new beginnings and the courage to trust in something beautiful. "You know," Victoria said as they walked toward the ice cream shop 3 blocks away, "I never thought I'd find what I was looking for in a broken elevator." "Sometimes," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand gently. "The best things happen when everything falls apart." Behind them, the Meridian Tower rose into the darkening sky, its windows glowing with the light of honest work and renewed purpose. And ahead of them stretched the possibility of a future built on the foundation of integrity, trust, and the kind of love that emerges when broken people choose to heal together. As Lily's laughter echoed off the city buildings around them, Victoria realized that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life: a family worth fighting for, and the courage to believe in happy endings.